Nearly 3 decades ago, Knoxville was shaken by a crime that just seemed almost unimaginable in its brutality. It was back in January 1995. 18-year-old Colleen Slemmer was lured away from the Job Corps campus where she lived and murdered by 3 of her peers. Now, at the center of this case, Christina Gail Pike, who would go on to become the youngest woman sentenced to death row in the United States at that time and in Tennessee. In this episode of Behind the Headline, we revisit the murder that really horrified this community, the trial that followed, and the long shadow this case has cast over East Tennessee. You are about to see one of the first stories that we aired right here on WBIR in the days after the horrific murder. And after that, we will hear from the reporter.
In a shocking new development, Knoxville police recovered evidence of possible occult activity in last week's murder of Colleen Slemmer. A satanic sign was carved into the Job Corps student's chest, and a piece of her skull was carried away from the crime scene. The victim's parents, who live in Florida, say they're horrified.
People don't understand when you go pick up your child or you're going to go identify a body, when you see what we saw, it's hard.
I don't think that there was a love triangle involved. I think there was other things involved in it.
But Knoxville police still say the murder stemmed from a broken relationship.
We are standing firm on our position that the motivation at this point, based on the facts we have in hand, is it involves a love triangle. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not, that the participants were not involved in some occult, where that's one of the secondary investigations we're looking at.
Police have recovered another weapon, a cardboard box cutter they say was used in Slemmer's murder. They say a mini meat cleaver was also used. Slemmer was found tortured to death on the UT Ag campus Friday. 3 fellow Job Corps students are charged with her murder. They remain behind bars. Now, evidence of possible occult activity is bringing Knoxville's Job Corps Center under even more scrutiny.
The public is just sick and tired of being victimized, whether it's a Job Corps student or any other thug who thinks they can run amok in our community and continue to victimize innocent people.
That story you just saw from then reporter Jennifer Leslie, WBIR reporter, and Jennifer Leslie joining us now. Jennifer, thank you for being with me, taking the time. Before we go down the path of revisiting this story, give us an update on you. Where are you now? What does your life look like?
Oh, well, thanks, Robin. It's really an honor to be here with you, and I'm so proud to know you and to have worked with you for so long, and worked with John North as well. I just have such fond memories of my time in Knoxville. Although this is a very difficult story for us to have covered and to recount. But after Knoxville, I moved to West Palm Beach to report for the NBC station there, and then to Atlanta, where I spent almost 20 years working for the NBC affiliate before leaving in 2018 to become the communications director for the city of Dunwoody, which is just a little bit north of Atlanta. And I've been doing that ever since. I've had a couple of children since I lived in Knoxville, but just love staying in touch with my friends and family. Consider y'all family there.
Yeah, so I'm glad I'm getting this opportunity to see you at least face to face. We've got a screen between us, but you had a very long career in journalism. But let's go back in time to, once again, 1995 and that horrific story that you were assigned to. Take us back to that time. Of course, we saw the story, but as a young reporter, how were you assigned that story, number one, and how did you approach it out of the gates?
So clearly in the early hours, we didn't know what it was. And I imagine it was looking around the newsroom, you hear the talk on the scanners, and we needed a crew. And so there you go. I remember being out on the scene. It was in January. It was cold. It was gray, and it was very active. It was a very active crime scene, and we would have known by then that it was a murder case. And so, as a young reporter, your nerves kick up. Sort of, my experience was you set your emotions aside because you're so focused on making sure you don't miss anything and listening and watching and looking and trying to read into whatever is happening before you as you're behind the crime scene tape. You could certainly tell this was not a normal, I mean, no murder case is normal, but this scene was very, very active. You could tell it was a big case.
One thing that struck me in looking back at the stories we covered, your story, we're right there, close to the scene though, and we're able to see the investigators doing their job. In your reporting, past that, my experiences of reporting crime scenes in these days, you don't get that access like we were able to be in that moment in time.
That's right. It is surprising how close we were, especially when they bring the victim out and you're right there. And, I think some of that was both sides, police and journalists, trying to kind of still work out how this whole thing was going to go. Generally, for journalism, it's probably better that now reporters are back and there's that distance, but we were close and we knew it was a big case. And by then we would have known too that it was a young female victim, but the details didn't come out right away. And certainly the gruesome nature of this horrific case took a few days. What I'm surprised by looking back now is how quickly, from the investigator standpoint, it moved. There now every case is different, but it can take days and weeks and months and even years in some cases to start putting pieces together and to find a suspect. But this case moved really fast. Now, on our end, we didn't know all the details. I think it was about, reporting reflects it was about a week before we knew some of the very difficult details with this case. But early on, we knew it was a big one.
Yes, and they did make those arrests in short order. Yes, the details, it took a little longer for us to gain that information. But do you recall what the feel was in the city once this word got out of this gruesome murder near the UT campus? Do you recall just the sense of what the community was feeling, not knowing what had happened, but this body of this young woman had been found?
Yeah, I think, that just, it happens in any community, but in Knoxville, it didn't happen a lot. And it was and here we're in this college town, and to have a young female victim was really shocking and took people back. And then a lot of people didn't know about the Job Corps program. So it certainly put a focus on that, a hard focus, and how that was different from UT and the fact that it took place sort of on part of the UT campus was a strange connection. So I think people were really surprised by just the fact that it was a young female victim. And then once the word of the young suspects and the fact that there was this, I remember, and sort of looking back on that reporting, there was sort of an emphasis on this love triangle nature. And so that alone was shocking. That there were three suspects, and how did they all, interact? And then to learn certainly this satanic twist, and how do you report that, and how do you talk about the details of what happened. I mean, it was really hard to know what to say and what to kind of soft pedal, because it was just awful.
And that's the challenge oftentimes. Sometimes we know a lot more information, and there are gruesome details. In this case, as you said, there are satanic elements. They carved a pentagram into Colleen Slemmer's chest, crushed her skull, took a piece of her skull as a souvenir, Krista Pike. That's a challenge, isn't it? You know this information at some point. How do you deliver the information that the viewer needs to know? There's a balance there, isn't it?
I mean, it's the stuff out of horror movies. You just don't imagine you'll ever have to talk about that or and then have to explain it or discuss it. And I know there were, we in the newsroom talked about what do we include, what do we don't. If you don't include it all, is that unfair to the victim? Is that unfair to to the public? I mean, is there a right to know and how much? And, in the end, it all came out. But I know early on, you're just, it was just so, it was so dark and really unbelievable. Like, what? They did what? And then to learn, I mean, again, we're talking about these young suspects. And I mean, how did really satan? I mean, that doesn't happen. That's in a novel. That doesn't happen in real life. And then you see, Krista Pike in the courtroom, and she's smiling and she's waving, and the detectives describe her as giddy, and you just think what a terrible waste of a life, and then this poor victim and her family. It just was really, and we weren't that much older. We were,
Right. 30 years ago, we were young pup reporters. A few
yes,
younger than the suspects, and the victim. And that's, as a young reporter, that's a lot to handle, isn't it? To process.
yeah. I mean, you're thinking they're sort of our generation. Yes, they're younger, but I was 25 at the time, and this was only my second reporting job. And so trying to sort through it all, how can you be fair? What words do you use? What images do you use? And how you just process it. Because even now, I mean, maybe, I don't know, as a mother now, maybe looking back, it's almost harder to imagine the darkness. But at the time, I know it was very, very hard for us all to figure out, just such a shock. And people were just like, that cannot happen. That cannot be true.
I think you hit on another thing, being at a different point in our lives, young, and then being a mother, it takes on different feelings. But now, as compared to then, they were all horrible, but there's that added layer, if you will.
Yeah.
You, once again, as we mentioned, had a very long career in journalism, and you covered many crimes during that time. How does this Job Corps murder crime compare in the breadth of the crime reporting you did over the course of decades?
I mean, I think it is one of the, most salacious cases I've covered or even seen. I mean, all of the details of it was torture, it was sacrifice, the fact that Krista Pike took a souvenir, that's just so twisted and so sad and so dark. And then you see, as we followed the case, and the lack of remorse, and the fact that it felt like she was just trying to show off, and you can't imagine that mindset. There was just no moral compass. And I've read about what a difficult childhood she had, and the normal sort of boundaries that we grow up with that I just don't think she had. And the way that manifested itself, she didn't know or care, and still doesn't. It seems that her life behind bars has been just as filled with drama, and ego. The ego is first. It's just probably the one where you just can't figure it out.
Yeah. Some are they're all horrible. all crimes, especially when you cover, are horrible, but there are those that you remember for perpetuity. Last question. What lessons do you think young reporters today could take from a story like this that we covered 30 years ago? Are there some just are standard, but are things so different now that reporters should cover things differently?
Well, I have thought in the last few days as we've been preparing for this, imagine what this story would be like with social media.
Yeah.
I mean, it would get national coverage. I don't remember that. I don't remember national coverage early on. I know since there have been stories, more stories about it, but it would probably have been a national, it would have been a national story. It would have been all over social media. It would have been probably a worldwide story. And I think that the scary thing about that is just how how out of control it can get these days. And then you have people covering it who don't have sort of the journalistic norms, the guardrails, the limits, and I can't imagine what that would be like now. It would just be a different ballgame.
Absolutely, especially with I mean, the facts of the case were hard enough, but in this day of misinformation, disinformation, you can only imagine that. Jennifer Leslie, it's such a pleasure to see you. It's been a long time. We won't let it be this long again, but thank you for taking time to talk with us about this case that for 30 years, it's still here and it's still continuing, but thank you for going back and remembering and sharing your insight.
Thank you, Robin. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Krista Pike, Daryl Shipp, and Shadala Peterson were all charged with first-degree murder. Shipp, who had turned 17 just barely 2 months before Colleen was murdered, was tried as an adult and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole. Peterson ended up receiving probation after pleading guilty to accessory after the fact. She did serve as a witness for the prosecution. Krista Pike, she faced a jury and a judge, and on March 22nd, 1996, she heard her sentence. Here is the story from former WBIR reporter and anchor Gene Patterson, who was in the courtroom when it was handed down.
And it is your duty as jurors to follow the law.
Prosecutor Bill Crabtree and defense attorney Bill Tallman confront jurors on the morning of the most important day in Krista Pike's life.
I'm not trying to tell you they're going to explain or justify why she's here. We're going to try to help you understand how she got here.
In the sentencing phase of a death penalty case, jurors hear a miniature trial. The state presented only one witness.
She spanked her for everything.
But the defense used several witnesses to help paint a picture of Krista's broken past.
I would go in and I would find this baby crawling around through piles of dog stool all over the house. It was never clean.
Pike's father testified he had trouble controlling his daughter. Pike's mother told jurors her relationship wasn't any better.
I wanted to be her friend, and I thought that maybe that would help us to be able to be closer together, so we did smoke marijuana together.
Later, Krista Pike's attorneys asked jurors for mercy.
I would suggest to you, do not kill Krista Gail Pike. Choose life.
At 4:30 Saturday afternoon, after an hour of deliberation, their choice was made clear.
The 12th day of January, 1997, your body shall be subjected to shock by sufficient current of electricity. May God have mercy upon you. Please hold on.
The 20-year-old is scheduled to die January 12, 1997, exactly 2 years from the day she beat Colleen Slemmer to death.
Joining me now, Gene Patterson, who spent a long time in journalism here in East Tennessee, now with Y12, but we're happy to have you to recount your experience, and also a regular here on this podcast.
Here I am, the regular.
The regular John North.
Lucky me.
Well, lucky for me that you're here, and for all of us, because I think you both will provide memories, insight to what has to be, I would have to think, one of the most horrific stories that you both have ever covered. Would you agree?
No, I would agree. You know, I spent 30 years covering crime in East Tennessee. And there's several a few that stand out among many covered. This is one of them. It was such a brutal case from the very beginning that the details of it, even 30 years later, stick in your head, right?
Yeah.
And so while a lot of the details, and John, we've all been talking before this began taping, but John remembers a lot more about some of the details than I do, but I do remember vividly the demeanor and the attitude and the activities during that trial of Christa Pike. She was like an actor playing in some role, because I don't think she connected what she did with actual reality.
Yeah. And you being in the courtroom as well, seeing what appeared to be, and especially, I don't know if at the end, when she got that death sentence, if that was an act. That seemed pretty real, but you all saw during the course of this trial, I think, many personalities of Christa Pike.
Well, good point. At the end, when the death sentence was pronounced, I think that was real.
Yeah.
I think that's where she went, oh. But we can talk more about that, because her mood soon changed after she left that courtroom. But to Gene's point, throughout that trial, really, I think she enjoyed the attention. I think she was intrigued. She got friendly with some people in the media, not us, but other people. She enjoyed having that spotlight on her. This was a young woman who, a day after she committed this murder, showed up at the crime scene line there at the Ag campus with some other young women, and was like, "What's going on? What's happening?" When she already knew what had happened. Yeah, the body was found, Colleen's body was found that morning, Friday morning. Christa shows up that afternoon at the crime scene line going, "What's happening?"
You know, I remember, because we were doing the morning show when that story broke, a producer got in our ears and said, "We've had a situation down near campus. We don't know exactly, but there's a body involved." And so that was our initial reporting on the case. And then as the evidence and details unfolded, you hear about the torture, this crazy situation involving Shipp and Pike and the victim, and
a love triangle.
Yes, what
about Satanism? Were you guys hearing about the Satanism?
Well, the pentagram and all that. I mean, there were all of that, but just the idea that someone could torture a person for something as simple as flirting with a boyfriend, and it reaches the crescendo of a blunt object against the skull, just is incredible.
Well, and we came prepared today, or John brought, because at this juncture, you were working at the News Sentinel as the court reporter,
That's right. The case fell into my hands pretty quickly after the killing, because once they're charged, and they were charged, I think, on the Saturday, body found Friday, talked to the cops on Saturday, charged on Saturday, then it falls into the courtroom arena, and that's where I picked it up.
Yeah, going back and once again making the point, this has been 30 years ago, and our memories, they fade with time. But do you remember, as the testimony was coming forth, how the jury reacted to this really horrific information, the pentagram, the skull, piece of skull that was taken as a souvenir? Do you remember?
Well,
how they
and
reacted?
John may remember it more vividly than me, but in those situations and I've sat through a number of trials where that kind of information, maybe not specific to removing a piece of a skull, but usually you can tell in a jury's face what they're thinking, because there's revulsion or there's shock or tears. I don't know that maybe all of that happened when all the information came out about the details of Slemmer's life.
Yeah, it's a good observation, and I would agree with you, because here's what I would say. I think this jury understood the gravitas of this case, and they did not mess around. This was a jury that was mostly stone-faced. I have covered trials where you see people blanch, cry. That did not happen in this case. This was like my recollection is one of the gravest sort of exercises that a jury had to go through, and it showed. They were not lighthearted, they were not chilled out. These were people here to do business. They had been told this was a very serious case, and they took it profoundly seriously.
And I think the experience with those types of cases, juries are very similar in that. I think if we go back over years in Knoxville, you look at the Christian Newsom cases, you look at the Lilly cases, all of those were very serious crimes, and juries knew it, and you're right, they reacted very much like that.
Okay, they were there to do a job.
And they did.
You're there doing a job as a reporter, and you're hearing, in the courtroom, you're hearing a lot of this information, but then you are tasked with going back and sharing this information with readers, with viewers. That can be a challenge to present that information, to do it in a way that they get the full picture, but then in a way that is not too much.
Well,
it's a challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and you have to, you put your reporter hat on, right? You take the emotion out of the thing, you write the story based on the facts, but you don't want to milk it down or wash it out to the point where it doesn't mean anything, because this was an impactful case. Colleen Slemmer deserved good reporting on what happened to her, because what happened to her was awful. And so, you write the story, and it takes you where it's supposed to go, I think, if you do it right.
Yeah.
Again, the facts, this is worse than fiction. This really was worse than fiction. I was thinking about this case last week, obviously, and we'll get to it for obvious reasons when Krista's death date was set, and I'm reliving the whole thing, and I'm retelling the whole thing, and I'm like, it's just incredible how bad it was. So what I tried to do was just not feel like I was exploiting anything. I wanted to be respectful of Colleen, because we were literally watching the murder of a young woman unfurl before our eyes through the clothing that was introduced, through the witnesses who came and talked about her, watching her parents in the courtroom, watching her clothing be presented, and there'd be testimony about how the killers took a blade and cut into her crotch and made her disrobe and cut her all over the place and ran after her as she tried to flee. It's a lot, and you just try to be serious and respectful because this demanded that.
You mentioned her parents. Throughout the years, you've maintained a relationship, if you will, with Colleen's mother, May Martinez.
Yep.
Talk about that initial meet, if you will, because that's, I think, one of the hardest things that we can do as a reporter is, in these horrific situations, talking to the family members.
Sure.
And you want to respect them, but once again, we're tasked with telling the story.
Well, May is not from here. May lives down in Florida, and that's where she lived for a long time. I think she and Colleen's husband were originally from the Philadelphia area, if I remember correctly. It's one of those things, I just always try to introduce myself, and I'm sure we all do the same. It's like, I'm going to be covering this story. I want to make sure, if you want to include what you have to say about this situation, but I'm not going to bother you, and I'm going to try very hard to be respectful and to ask respectful questions toward you. I am not here to take advantage of this or build a career off of this. I'm just trying to show this part of the story. Sometimes people don't want to have anything to do with you, and that's okay. I've covered murder trials where the family, at the end of the day, they're gone. Others are more willing. May and I just kind of, we had a good relationship. She was from out of town. I would talk to her. She saw me every day. When it was over, it was not over because we had other defendants to be tried. That's and also, now we had a jury that had decided Krista should face the death penalty, which means you are in it for the long haul. So I just always have tried to think about May, check in with her from time to time, say, hey, how are you doing? I did that a few weeks ago. I just sent her a message. I said, how are you doing? She says, why are you asking me that? That's May. She's like, why are you asking me that? I'm like, I'm just checking in with you, May. I'm just making sure you're okay.
Well, and for good reason, because just let's bring this story up to date. 30 years later, Colleen Slemmer, or not Colleen Slemmer, sorry, Krista Pike, there's an execution date for her. 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about you had a long career in journalism, are now in your second chapter in another career. It's taken this long for this to come to pass.
And a lot of people who support the death penalty think that's too long. I disagree. I think the last thing you want to do is put somebody in an electric chair or in an injection situation where you don't know, you don't have it right. And these folks have every opportunity to argue their case that they shouldn't die. And so 30 years, while it may seem long, I think it's probably, okay, it is a little long, but I think it's probably about the only way you can do it and feel safe and comfortable that you're doing it right. That said, 30 years later, you just wonder if you wanted closure in your life because someone did a horrible thing to a loved one, 30 years later, how do you feel, and does it offer any closure?
Well, to that point, I asked that to Mae Martinez, called her the other day, did a Zoom interview with her, and that's her response to that question. Take a look. Mae, just last week, we learned that Krista Pike now has an execution date 30 years after the death of your daughter.
Right.
How did you take that news?
Kind of rough. Hopefully it'll happen, but it hit me very surprising, very, very surprising.
30 years.
Huh?
30 years.
Yes, 30 years. To the date, believe it or not. I was like real surprised,
Yeah. But you have waited each day and pushed each day for justice. Do you think when and if the execution happens, is that going to be justice for you and for Colleen?
I don't think it's so much justice as finally getting Colleen back together and finally ending all of this mess. Yes, she deserves to be punished, and I don't feel she should be living and having things on death row and eating and drinking and all that. But justice, it's not going to bring Colleen back. It's not going to bring her life at all. And it's not going to impact me anymore than it has, other than having all these appeals and all this stuff happening that she's doing.
Yeah. Do you plan to be here for her execution in
Yes, I
Tennessee? You're in Florida now.
Yes, I do.
You do. You do. Another person who was charged in your daughter's murder, to Daryl Shipp. He is up for parole. What are your thoughts on that?
I was just kind of shocked because it's only been 28 years for him. He served 28 years in a couple of months. So the hearing is on Wednesday. They didn't give me no notice, so I couldn't come. But I was kind of shocked because I don't think he should be out either, because he helped put it in there,
Mm-hmm.
He held Colleen down. He punched her, he carved a pentagram in her. He did part of it, And I don't feel Shadella should have been loose either, but she's free.
How has your loss impacted you these last 3 decades of your daughter? Do you think about what she could be today, what she'd be doing today?
I know what she would be today. She would have been a computer geek. She loves computers. She always messed with her father, and she loved helping handicapped children and got medals for it. She did the run every year,
Mm-hmm.
She's missed because she did an awful lot with the school system. She would paint the classrooms every year, the day the fresh new school started. But it's rough. It really is. That's a big part of my life that seems like it never happened.
Yeah. Yeah. You fought all these 30 years to get your daughter's body back, and you got most of it, but you did not receive, or up to a point that we had covered, a portion of Colleen's skull
The
that,
piece that she had in her pocket.
yeah,
As
that
a
they had kept as
souvenir.
a souvenir.
Yes.
Have you gotten that
They-
back? Are you trying to get it back? Where does that stand?
They can't find it. Nashville, Tennessee, evidence room cannot find it. Knoxville, evidence room cannot find it. Nobody knows where it's at. So I guess it's lost. And we've looked into it and it hasn't come up.
That's always been something I remember you saying you wanted her all. You wanted all of her.
Of course, yeah.
Do you have a message for Krista Pike?
No. No.
What do you think this journey that you've been on for 30 years, your family has been on for 30 years, what does it say about the justice system?
It stinks. The justice, they don't care about victims, they don't help victims, and there's no support whatsoever for victims. If you're a criminal, you get everything. And I just feel like somebody should have been there for me. And nobody's been there all along. I have fought my way from day one to get what I needed and get back and forth to Tennessee. It was a long journey. It really was.
How do you, and how have you coped with this case will go silent for a while and then it'll come back and go silent for a while? How did you cope with that before we got to this point of an execution date?
Well, it was a lot because it always come up once in a while, and people out there doing, different podcasts and stuff like that, and then I would find out about it and stuff. The worst thing I found is when Krista did a podcast, she literally was talking on the podcast, and so was Daryl. And I felt that was very disrespectful for Tennessee to allow her to do that. Because that was like, go ahead, I'll do it again,
I know you say you don't have a message for her. Would you ever want to, at some point, talk to her? Because I've heard, and I don't know if this is indeed the case, it's just in talking that she would want to talk to you.
I wouldn't want nothing to say to her. We were in trial. I've never asked to say to talk to her. I never wanted to talk to her. She has nothing that I want other than she's a breathing thing that gets everything she wants. If she said something to me, she should have said it at the trial, and she didn't.
How do you want your daughter to be remembered?
That she was very sweet, and she'd do anything for anybody, and she didn't deserve this. She did not deserve this. Everybody was her friend. The night that she called me, that she was killed, I was at the base commissary, and I didn't have good reception, so I said I'd call her back. She was complaining about 3 kids bothering her and going through her stuff. And then the next morning she was gone.
And as you said, it's 3 decades later, almost to the date of, Well, May, thank you for talking with me and sharing your memories of your daughter with us. And the story isn't over yet.
No, it's not, but I hope it goes fast. I hope that they do it now. I really do, but they're going to make me wait. Yeah. But thank you for Karen. John was right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, May.
All right. Bye.
Clearly, May Martinez is at a point right now where she has this execution date ahead of her. She does plan to be there. And now, 30 years later, where are we with this case? We're still talking about this case. Things have changed. There is an execution date. To Daryl Shipp, he's going to have a parole hearing.
Yes.
Waiting to see eventually where that goes. Job Corps.
Yeah.
It came and went.
It did. Of course, Job Corps was located right down off 17th Street at a former hotel.
On Dale.
Yes. And I remember back even prior to this murder, there were reports of assaults and robberies in the Fort Sanders community there and near the Strip and on the Strip, as I recall. And I used to have conversations with guys like Mike Chase, who owned Copper Cellar, who absolutely knew it was Job Corps students who were doing this work. And he was terrified to release his employees at 1, 2, 3 in the morning because they stayed up late into the parking lot, which was right behind their building, because he was afraid they'd get mugged or assaulted. And, you know, I can understand that fear. And obviously, as John, you pointed out, you know, Job Corps didn't last long after all this.
No, I moved here in '93, and pretty much after this killing happened in January of '95, it just really sort of struck a nerve with the community, downtown businesses, strip businesses, sports centers. They were like, okay, that's it.
Yep.
We have put up with this long enough. We are not putting up with it anymore. There were community meetings held. But, you know, for folks who don't know about what Job Corps was, it was some disadvantaged kids and maybe some kids where the court was like, you got two options. You can go to jail or you can go to Job Corps.
That's right.
And so some kids were like, well, I'll take Job Corps then. So you had some kids that maybe were not the best behaved, and that certainly was true at this place. I mean, Daryl and Krista had their own little shrines to Satan and would, you know, do their little prayers and what have you. Other things went on. This was the death knell as well for Job Corps. It was like, okay, it's done. And it got out of town very quickly. Turned into a Flophouse Hotel. It was an old Holiday Inn, I think, for the World's Fair.
It was.
And kind of on the fringe of the grounds, turned into kind of a Flophouse apartment hotel. Bad things continued to happen at that place, and then they tore it down.
Yeah.
Are there any lessons for this community, for us as journalists, that come out of covering a story like this and experiencing a story like this?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm not sure. John, you may be able to answer that.
What?
I guess a couple things come to mind. One is that you are going to hear things that will make your hair stand on end, and you just have to figure out a way to deal with that mentally if you can. Some people cannot. Some people, you know, just don't want to go through all this, and I understand it because, you know, this person was tortured. Yeah. So that's one thing. This is just about as nitty-gritty as it gets, and that was a tiny courtroom, by the way. As you know, Mary Beth Leibowitz's courtroom was very small, still in operation today, and every time I go in there, I think of this case. I will tell you the other thing, if there's a lesson that I took away from this, and 30 years I am even more bothered, is these kids, some of these kids, these defendants were kind of cast-off kids. Krista she had a terrible background, awful. Daryl came from Memphis. That's why he ended up here in a bad way. These were kids, 18, 19, 17 years old. And I used to sit and think, God, this is really bad, what is happening in our society. I'm so glad it's not pervasive. I don't think it's gotten any better. I think it's gotten worse. And my point is, I worry about society. I worried when this happened, and I worry even more today. This case, even though it happened in '95, I feel it's as contemporary today as it was then.
Well, it resonates. It still resonates.
Well, and I think to John's point about that, I mean, at a time when we are looking at everything but trying to help that underclass or that disadvantaged, I mean, in fact, we're trying to point the finger at them as the problems for all the problems, right? And we should be maybe looking at it from a different perspective, and I think that's right. I think, well, you look at a lot of the crime stories that we have covered, you've covered, you look at some of, and especially young kids, they all, it seems, have some similarities in common because they come from those sort of lifestyles or homes where maybe they didn't have everything. Now, that's not always the case, but it oftentimes is.
And those are the other stories that come out of a story like this, when you dig deeper into, okay, what is the background? Not to make excuses for it by any means, but to dig deeper into how could this have been possible?
Yeah, and how could we have foreseen that and fixed it before it happened? We're great at pointing the finger. We're not very good at fixing it before it happens, right? We tend to go, that was inevitable.
Krista had a mom who smoked weed with her when she was a child. Krista grew her own pot plants. She got drunk. She was sexually promiscuous. She had a live-in boyfriend when she was 14 years old. those are just some of the things going on. And the law has taken care of what they think, what it thinks of her crime, but you can't ignore what came from her childhood when she ended up in Knoxville, Tennessee at the Job Corps Center.
Okay, so this was 1995. You were in the courtroom
Yep.
the next day, this
Yep.
came out.
Mhm.
You were in the courtroom, 6 o'clock, your story came out. Today we live in this world. It's happening in real time. Could you imagine covering that story
Listen,
from then now?
Yeah, I've always said, it's been 10 years since I was in the business full time. And I've always admired young reporters who not only have to turn a story at 6 o'clock, but also in real time, text out notices and updates and all these other things. It makes the art of reporting very, very tough because, you want to be first. You want to beat the guys down the street. You want to beat, in our case, it was beat John North, that kind of thing.
There was a competition.
Sure, of course there was.
Competition.
No, well, not always healthy. No. But you also want it right. And so those are competing, objectives there. Sometimes being first isn't always the best. So I just think it's even harder today to write well-rounded, fair stories. I think.
I would not want to try and cover something like this today because you have to do so many different things, and things get so distorted today in social media that it's difficult enough with something like this to report the truth regardless of the chatter that's out there. And we talked about this in the Behind the Headline episode we did on Christian Newsom. We had challenges with Christian Newsom because of, we had social media back then, and people were saying all kinds of utterly untrue things about that case. We didn't have social media here. By the way, I just want to tell you something. How far have we come? This trial was one of the very first where we used digital photography. One of the very first. Again, something which back then was a huge novelty. You didn't use film. You had these things called cards, and you recorded. I was like, oh, that can't work. That's not going to be any good.
And let's give you proof that it worked. It worked.
Yeah.
And this, of
Michael
course,
Patrick, I think, shot that. He's now retired.
Right, and
but
of
you
course,
all know Michael.
this was a skull with
that's
the piece.
Colleen's skull, and that gap there is where Krista plucked a piece from Colleen's head as she lay dying to take away as a souvenir.
And as we heard May say, she fought for so long to get that back and has not gotten it back because she says it's been lost. I'm going to ask you this last question because I've asked John multiple times, but and he so aptly gives a great answer. That Jean, as a longtime journalist, yes, I will always say, once a journalist, always a journalist. It's innate in us to want to know facts, information. Sure. But how do you see this story, the Job Corps murder story, as an example of the power of local journalism?
Wow. Well, certainly the public has an insatiable appetite for true crime. And to that degree, I mean, the reporting on this case and stories like this always have power. They galvanize public opinion. If our reporting's wrong with Krista Pike, if she had not been, if it had been Shipp, I'm sure Shadola Peterson, she turned, right? What if it had been her? But it has the power to create public opinion, both good and bad. And certainly in this case, with the facts so crazy and horrific, and it made for that to be a lot easier to grab hold of and run with. And so,
tell the story.
Anyway.
And that's what we're tasked with telling the story.
I wish I'd heard what John had to say, because I know that his answer to that question had to be so much better. But
no, it's taking what is there and reporting it and presenting it factually with the information to support it for our viewers and our readers.
And
That's
you guys
the
being
goal.
in this business have heard a lot. Well, why do you have to give us all this bad news? Why is that? Why can't you just give us the news, some good news, and move along? Because this is life, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't tell this story, then Job Corps sits up there forever, and maybe another Krista Pike's walking down the road.
I suspect we all three got into this business for kind of the same reason, which was to inform the public about things that were happening. And we take that very, very seriously. And some people today don't even conceive of that being a reason why one would go into journalism. It's because you get your face out there, you get clicks, you get followers, you get whatever. I have always, I suppose this sounds Boy Scoutish, and I never was a Boy Scout. I take this profession really seriously, and I used to sit in that courtroom and still today say to myself, I'm going to tell this story to the people who can't be here, right? That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be, you can't be here, but I hope you will pick this up or watch Channel 10 and feel comfort and assurance that you're getting an accurate report of what happened. And that may sound quaint, but that's why I got into this business.
And let me add one other point to that, because we've all heard from young wannabe TV anchors, TV reporters. What's the quickest path, or how's the best path to being a TV anchor? And
get out on the streets.
Thank
and
you,
report.
and that's always my advice.
Yeah.
Go out there and learn to become a good reporter, because the better reporter you are, the better anchor you'll be. Because it's not about just reading the copy; you actually understand what you're reading and put it in context.
And to ask the questions.
But how many of these young people are willing to do the work to get there? And unfortunately, what we're seeing across and we're getting into a totally different topic here.
It's for the next episode.
But
we'll give a precursor.
you know, when you've got pseudo journalists with huge audiences, that's what you get. You get people who they're selling their agenda or their products or whatever, their name for sure. And I'm not sure that is the best thing that could happen to America regarding journalism and the First Amendment.
What I think, what always, I was the kid who wanted to know why. Always ask the question, but asking those questions, you get the information that people need to make the best decisions for their lives.
By the way, one quick correction of myself. Michael Patrick didn't take this picture. It was Margaret Bentledge. Margaret, I'm sorry. She is now Margaret Bentledge Wood, and she is a wonderful person, and she took that picture. Sorry, Margaret.
Guess what? That's what a good journalist does.
And see, I was going to point out that Patrick is probably still shooting film. I mean,
I'm sure he is. He probably still is.
Oh, my friends. Gino, we used to work anchor together, so I can call him Gino. And John, thank you as always for sharing your memories, hard memories, not so happy memories, but your insight as well into this work that we do. So thank you both. And for that, we say thank you for joining us as well. We hope you'll join us for the next episode of Behind the Headline.